want to welcome you into the Lootpress studios here. You're watching the Lootpress Sports Lowdown show. I'm Tyler Jackson, the sports editor at Lootpress, joined as always by my co-host Rusty Udy, sports writer at Lootpress. Rusty, how are you doing today?
We're pretty good, enjoying the weather, but we're going to kick the postseason into high gear here this week.
Absolutely. It's kind of that race to the finish line. It starts a little bit with golf, and then it really starts here with soccer sectionals and volleyball regionals and sectionals and all that soon afterwards, and accumulates here in the month of November with state championships in both sports and then football playoffs. Just one of those rat races, it seems like.
Seems like it just blows up all at once.
Absolutely. We got a great show planned for you today, including some news that dropped today. Again, we're filming this on Monday, but I kind of want to start there with, we had the proposals, they were sent to us from a friend of the show. If you haven't been following, the WVSSAC has kind of been in a bit of a pickle because there have been different classes, different schools have appealed what classifications they've been in since the classifications were released in December and they moved it all to 4 sports. Just to kind of start, originally there was an agreed upon formula by the competition committee, and then whenever it was brought up to the principals who vote on it, they kind of took that and they went rogue and did what they wanted to do, and it caused quite a fuss, and it led to a couple of schools, I think around 11, appealing. They bounced back and forth. They appealed to the SSAC, then they went to the Department of Education. Department of Education went them back to the SSAC for another appeal. The SSAC supposedly didn't listen to the appeals, kind of blew it off. So the Department of Education granted sort of these emergency injunction appeals. So these 11 schools, locally Oak Hill was one of them, a couple more got bumped down throughout the state. And then all the ones in the formula that were under those or lower in the formula rankings were also bumped down. And it's caused a mess as far as playoff ratings and points and things like that have gone. And then yesterday there was, I believe it was yesterday, there was an email sent out to several administrators throughout the state about some of the proposals that they'd be talking about on Thursday of this week. And I believe there were 31 proposals overall from 17 different schools. One of them was a joint between Williamstown and Doddridge. And what it does is it aims to fix sort of the issues that people have had problems with. The way the formula goes, I think it's like 80% enrollment and then 10% socioeconomic and then 10% location. And everyone's been trying to figure out something that they feel sort of suits their school system. And we've got a bunch of different proposals. I took all morning kind of writing up summaries of each of them, and some of them were just kind of building off of just minor rules. It's like 10-1 says this, about 4 classes, so you have to adjust to make sure 10-2 is like sort of different. But really, there were some different, interesting, unique proposals. One of them, I think there was only one of them that recommended going back to 3 classes, but most of them kind of seemed to be enrollment based. And I just kind of want to start off with it. I'm not sure that it'll go back to enrollment based. We've talked to some people, and from what I understand, the Class A's, which there are a majority, there are more Class A's than what there are in any other class. They seem to be very much against enrollment, and I could absolutely understand why, because that group's same with a lot of the private schools, which is kind of the unsaid issue in all of this. A lot of it's created to balance that out to some extent. But yeah, I would kind of be surprised if they went to an enrollment-based model. And I know the SSAC is very much against that because there's a lot of data that supports that it's a bad decision to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the real answer is. It's definitely there's a lot of people that know a lot of stuff about this, and then they're just going to have to sit in there and hammer it out and get it done. I mean, enrollment's got to factor into it somewhat, but as we've talked before, and I really feel like that the socioeconomical thing is really important, because we just have such a wide variety, of economies in our state, and that leads to different kind of athletes and kids that are going to school in certain places. So I just think that's got to be a factor, but it's got to be right. I think that's the big problem with this last model is that you look at some of the economic scores and you're like, have you driven around these places? I mean, do you know what it's like there? Because I don't think they really do. Mm-hmm. And, because, I just always point to Midland Trail because, how in the world Midland Trail is a AA school, that's like saying I'm a world-class sprinter.
Yeah.
That's just, no, it's not.
And they got hammered under the location thing, and they were one of the schools that submitted the proposal, and their proposal was pretty much to take the location factor out of it. And then I understand that. And Pikeview was a similar,
Right.
They wanted to take that out because their location, they got dinged with Beckley Beckley, and Pugview's in our coverage area, but I wouldn't really consider them like part of the Beckley metro area.
No, they're Mercer County.
Yeah, clear down in Mercer County.
And really, I don't know if I'd really call them part of Princeton that much, what I'm saying? They're just kind of out there by themselves, and, you look at the schools that, kind of made up that school, there's a lot of single-A schools, a lot of small schools that are not there for a reason now, so there's not very many people in those areas. So, I just think the economic thing was just not, I don't know, it just was not worked out well, because, the scores were just awful, and, I think you can balance out the numbers part with that factor if it's done correctly. But, they just need to sit in there and hammer it out. And then I guess the biggest thing is kind of listen to the people that are hammering it out. They know what they're talking about. They know what the problems are. I've always thought, as far as a manager goes, if you don't listen to your people and you kind of go on your own, knowledge, you're going to look stupid real quick. So listen to the people that are in the know and go with what they have to say, and let's see how it works, because it sure hasn't worked on the other end. So let's see what they have to say, and let's go for that.
Yeah, to me, there are two injunction points here where this could have been, if the principals, and this is from my understanding from different parties, the SSAC itself, and from competition committee and ADs, for the most part, they were under the assumption that what was hammered out and was originally presented to the board was what was going to be. And again, it's important to separate kind of the entities of the SSAC, like Wayne Ryan and all those folks, Sidney Daniel. Those aren't the ones that are out here voting on these things. The principals on that board are the ones that decided to go with this decision. Wayne and Cindy and all them, they kind of had things hammered out with the committees. They talked to the coaches. Yep. And then they had a plan presented, and then it was kind of dashed by them. Yep. So there's your first injunction point. And then the second one that was described to me is, hey, if some of these appeals are actually listened to and they felt like they weren't getting disrespected, you probably don't have the same issue. Right. If you return half those appeals, maybe grant Frankfurt their appeal. I've never been to Frankfurt, but it seems like enrollment-wise, they probably belong in AA. Yeah. They have some talent that comes through every now and then, but just enrollment-wise, you look at them, I think they're in that 400, 500 range. Yep. Seems like they're very much in
rural,
AA.
Very rural area.
Exactly. So if you listen to some of those and you grant them, then you're probably fine. But they didn't, and then it seemed like there was no turning back at that point from everything that I've been told. Just looking over the proposals, the one that really stood out to me was Spring Valley. And I was critical of Spring Valley dropping from Quad A because I think they're just 10 miles outside of Huntington, and Huntington's the biggest metro area in the state. I'm pretty sure it's bigger than Charleston. So I was like, okay, I want to see what Spring Valley did, and they had a very fleshed out, very thorough, all sorts of data. You can find all the proposals on lootpress.com, and I even attached the document there. But Spring Valley suggested something that kids that qualify for free lunch or reduced lunch, they count towards, say, half a student towards enrollment. So it kind of helps that number. And they had a chart that basically broke everything down, divided where you split the schools at and everything. Yep. And I was kind of looking at which schools ended up in which class, and it seems sort of appropriate to me just looking at it that way. And again, that's a good workaround to get around the location factor, especially when you're right there by Huntington. Weir had another interesting one too, because
I like that one.
You can't explicitly say that there's a transfer variable in there. But I do think that's the reality. There has to be something in there when you're doing classifications that that account for transfers or kids that are transferring in. Weir's had for every kid out of district they count as 1.25 kids. For every kid out of county they count for 1.5 kids, and then for every kid out of state they count for 2. I would say you probably need to multiply that even more to kind of go by that way, because there are areas where you get a lot of transfers. Not to pick out Fairmont Senior in particular, but Fairmont Senior had a lot of kids that transferred over from North Marion, and I don't know if those are originally Fairmont Senior District kids or they're transferring from North Marion. But you need to have that, and I've talked about this with Independence. It was my belief for the longest time that even though Independence thought they should be a AA school because of their proximity to Beckley, I never agreed with that. And then my opinion kind of changed, just kind of seeing, okay, it impacts them because they don't field as many football teams. You might get 1 or 2 good athletes over here, but you're playing tough schedules. Your kids are getting beat on and things like that. So I lean a little bit more back. I can see it now. Though if you factor in that sort of model or factor in some sort of variable where you're accounting for transfers, and you can kind of mitigate that, or you can kind of offset that a little bit. So it's like, okay, like if we get 2 transfers from Beckley, then we multiply that, and then we can kind of add that to our enrollment numbers and go from there. So I do like that concept, and I like some of what Spring Valley was presented. Most of what stood out to me, though, is I didn't really like anybody's fully in particular. There were still some drawbacks. The one that was kind of brought up was, moving classifications from every 4 years to 2 years, and I don't like that. Independence coach John Lilly brought up a good point. They get that first year waiver after the classifications are announced, and then the next year you have to have six teams within your class on your schedule, and it's already tough enough. So then you're saying, okay, we're going to settle on our schedule, and then it's going to get all warped up again a year later. So I think, and there was a poll sent out, and most schools it was very slim margins, but a lot of them were like, let's do it maybe every 2 years. And I understand wanting to get the data, but if you're going to go to a 2-year model, you have to mandate that we're going to have divisional or we're going to have regional play where you have to place, these amount of teams in your region and guarantee these things. Right. I think that's the only way that reasonably you get to 2 years.
Yeah, if you don't, if you try to set up a schedule in football, basketball and all these other sports, it's year to year, so it's no big deal. But trying to do it in football would be misery completely. And and honestly, I think we're kind of pushing towards a scheduling mandate anyway, because we've kind of noticed that this year, it's just the schedules are insane this year. I mean, the travel is ridiculous, and I'm just kind of wondering, how much of a safety factor is that? Because you got kids traveling so much. I mean, I understand they're young, and I understand they're young athletes, but you still get run down. And football is a physical sport. And, if you're constantly traveling all over the place, week to week, and, I just don't know, if that's really good physically and mentally for kids.
Keeps them out of the classroom, too. In the case of Independence, they have to go to Brook on a Friday night.
Right.
And it still ended up starting late.
Yeah.
And those are the issues.
And that's the factor, too, is we don't ever know when the games are going to start.
Exactly. And most of these teams, if there's a classification change, most of those contracts have clauses in them where they can automatically get out of it. They don't have to fulfill the contract. Yep. Almost all of them are like, hey, like if 1 year this happens, like you're a AAA or you're a AA and we're AA, yep. that there goes the end of that. And Independence has kind of run into some of those, and they said we won't be surprised if Brooks drops us next year, because they have to come to us. There's a clause in the schedule where they can just kind of get out of it and find something a little bit easier, find something a little bit closer. So, it's quite a mess. I think there are different metrics. Frankfurt had a good one that was fleshed out too, and some of them are trying to aim to create more balance as far as the amount of teams in each class. Yep. A lot of them seem pretty set on keeping Quad A as far as 20 to 16 teams. Yep. Again, going back and looking at the data and looking at the charts and everything, Quad A really can't be more than 16 teams, because then you start to fall into that big difference.
I think if you're going to a numbers situation, you're going to have to drop the even number of schools. You're going to have to really lose that concept. You got to, if you got schools with 2,000 kids in them, you can't say, okay, well, we need 24 teams in this class, and you got teams down here to 1,000. I mean, let's be realistic. That's not even close. It's not going to work. So, you're going to have to figure out, if you go by a numbers model, what's the gap? Is it 500 students? Is it 600 students? But you start getting down to 800, 900, 1,000 students difference. I mean, let's be realistic. That's totally different. Totally, an unfair advantage, almost for certain schools. So, I think you got to work that out. But, what's weird about West Virginia is that, we're really not big enough for 4 classes, but there's enough disparity probably to have 5 classes, because there's so much of a gap there. And that's probably going to leave a big gap in a big chunk in single A. But, we're just going to have to work it out that way, because we can't have this big, huge disparity. I mean, even 500 to 1,000, how much more of an advantage is that, to have 500 more kids in school? So, that's another big factor, or a big step to cross.
Yeah, and truthfully to me, I think that there are just a lot of people chiming in on it that, realistically, in some chances, just don't really have that opportunity. I mean, let's look who the championship contenders are in AAA. Fairmont, Bridgeport, Princeton. That's not any different than what it's been in years past. Those teams have always been championship contenders. in Double A. Frankfurt probably gets a little bit of a bump being in Double A this year, but Williamstown, Wheeling Central, Independence, those are teams that we've become accustomed to seeing it play for state championships.
Yep.
In Quad A, it's Martinsburg and whoever's their fodder that year. Single A creates some more, but at the same time, like you're still seeing those top powers rise. And against Spring Valley, it has a more realistic chance in Triple A because you're not playing Martinsburg and Quad A. But you're not really seeing a ton of new teams outside of Single A emerge as legitimate contenders. So I think it's all overblown, at least specifically for football. That's kind of where I sit on it.
I think you'll see more in the back end, kind of like we do at the basketball tournaments now. We see teams, in the back end of the top 8 or whatever that we've never seen before. So you may see more teams in the playoffs, which that's kind of a good thing for the school too. But the cream's always going to kind of step to the top. So
yeah, and even then you tried to, overall they've not all gotten together, but systemically, it's kind of gotten to the point where they try to give teams like Bluefield or Fairmont Senior Independence the shaft. It's like, okay, you'll end up coming in as a 14 or 15, 16 seed. See how you like that. And then really it's like, all right, you're a 1, 2, 3 seed. See how you like Fairmont, Bluefield, and Independence coming to your crib in the first round.
Exactly.
It's not a lot of fun. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's all I got to say on that. Do you have anything else before we move on to?
No, I just hope they can kind of get it's never going to be happy for everybody. There's no way to fix a system like that, but hopefully we can get something that we're all pretty comfortable with. Gotcha.
Go ahead and move into what we had for Week 8, and this was a pretty exciting slate. First game I want to start off with was yours, James Monroe, Midland Trail. This one was over by the end of the first quarter. Midland Trail's defense, not Midland Trail's, but James Monroe's defense, as we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, it shined again. They were forcing numerous turnovers. They were creating short fields. They were scoring off of it. And the starters for James Monroe got the rest in the second half, which is pretty huge because we've talked about it. They've played a lot of physical football over the last couple of weeks. They played 2 games in 1 week. Really, an equality win, We thought Midland Trail, they've been competitive in the last couple of weeks, last couple of games that they've played. But this one was just never seemed competitive, and head coach Jeremy Moore seemed pretty disappointed in his group.
Yeah, he was pretty shook up. But you talk with Coach Mustaine, John Mustaine from James Monroe after the game, and he was legitimately worried about this game. And we're thinking that the kind of Midland Trail seemed to turn the corner a little bit. They played Nicholas County really tough, the week before, and Nicholas County went down and beat Greenbrier East this week. So, we felt like they were kind of the trail that we thought we were going to get this year, and he was legitimately worried about this game. They had a tough physical game against Greenbrier West the week before, and he admitted to being concerned. But the thing he liked about his crew was that he had been preaching to them pretty much that you've got to come out and take command from the start in these games, don't be passive about things. And I think he might be a little concerned with that too, because even though he has great leaders on that team, really great leaders, they're kind of quiet in a way too. They kind of those lead by example guys. They're not going to be those big rah-rah guys that get in your face. So, he wanted them to get out quick, and boy, did they. They had 6 plays, I think 74 yards on the first drive, and you really got to feel at that point that, man, they just kind of came out and punched Trail in the mouth, and I was thinking, well, we'll see what happens. And then, unfortunately for Trail, they're just so Jekyll and Hyde. When they take care of the football, they're a pretty good team. When they don't, then they get clobbered, and they didn't. That was an interception, a fumble, 2 scores, and I think it was 21-0 before we got the 7-minute mark of the first quarter, and it was never any better after that. And Trail never really mustered much offense whatsoever. The whole game was basically played in their territory. Every time outside of the first drive that James Monroe got the ball, it was a short field that they were using to score on. So the game was unfortunately never close. It never seemed like James Monroe was going to lose that game at any point. And you talk with Jeremy Moore after the game, and man, you just feel for the dude. He's done everything he thinks he can do. He's worked on it. He's talked about it. He's preached ball control. He even told him that basically, our playoff, we're on a lifeline right now. We have got to win this week. And, man, the kids just didn't seem to respond. I mean, they really didn't. And that's really kind of unfortunate and, kind of a shocker in a way because, that's not been the trail way in the past. They've really been pretty effective. So I don't know. I mean, that's going to be tough, going down the stretch. We'll see how they respond.
And
but
they don't have points opportunities. Like their schedule it's pretty rough.
It's
Like
brutal.
they're not going to get any help. And on the flip side, we've talked about it a little bit, but for James and Rowe, and we looked at the projected ratings. I think right now they're still at number 14, and there's going to be a lot of emphasis put on that Bluefield game. It's Thursday night game in Week 11, which is going to be really interesting. But at the same time, James and Rowe, like, even if they do get in as like a 14 or 13 seed, I would not want to I wouldn't want them coming to my house in round one. That is because defense travels really well, and then I think James and Rowe is comfortable playing that game through Roane County. You might not want to see a James and Rowe, and they've already played Wheeling Central, and we've seen how that's gone. Wheeling Central really won off some big plays there, but it wasn't. It was 28-6, but it's not like they blew them out. It was like a 14-6, a 14-0 halftime game. They had to take their time kind of accumulating scores. It wasn't just piled on really quickly. So they're improving. They were a younger bunch. We talked about it last week. I think about almost 30 of the kids they have are underclassmen. I don't know where they go from here. I do think they're probably going to be locked into a playoff spot. I don't think they really have a shot at getting home just based on how things are going, unless they just get a ton of bonus points, maybe from winning a Bluefield game if they can. But they are a dangerous team. They're not a team I want to see in round one.
And that offense, it was rough at the beginning of the season, but it looks very well tuned right now. Leighton Dowdy, the quarterback, is really and he really seems to be able to find the gaps when he runs the ball. And, they're effective with Brock Parker. The little Comer kid, Ben Comer has been a nice change of pace back that is just really quick. And, they've got some good receivers too. So, they're dangerous, and it's almost like they lull you to sleep a little bit. I don't know. It's funny watching teams try to defend them, and it just almost seems like, one of the old Penn State kind of plodding along, and before you know it, you look up and, man, we're down 4 touchdowns. What happened?
Absolutely. Want to move on to the game that I covered, and that was Beckley at Princeton. Been a lot of discourse on this one about the officiating. I just first thing I want to say is officiating has never lost anybody a game. You look at it, there were probably 60 other plays in this game. I know that there was a touchdown called back to A.J. Thomas's, I think about like a 80-yard touchdown. Right. It was called back on a hold, and that might have made it, I think, 7-0 or 14-0 at that point. But the way I look at it, if you're Beckley, you can't point to the officiating. I haven't seen the coaches or players point to this, but I've seen fans just comment on some of the stories we've put out there. But Beckley kind of controlled their own fate, and I say this for every team. Like, you might look at those 2 or 3 plays, but there are 60 other plays that you get to run essentially. Beckley, for example, they got down to the 1. They had 1st and goal at the 1. And they were held out of the end zone in 4 straight plays. If you can't get it there, you're talking about that would put you up 7-0. You're probably 14-0 going into the half. Like, those are the opportunities. That's probably what you should be talking about more than officiating. Right. And I saw that and the illegal man downfield as far as on the Daniel Jennings screen that Princeton scored on. And some other things, but also, there were some very, very, very late hits on Chance Parker that probably unquestionably should have been flagged. So to me, it all comes out in the wash. But overall, I thought it was an extremely impressive game from Princeton. Chance Parker, quarterback for Princeton, I didn't think that he had a really good game. I thought Beckley was able to get to him and cause him some issues. He was looking a little bit skittish, jitterish in the pocket, kind of abandoning some pockets, sailing some throws. So Princeton said, okay, like, what we're going to do is we're just going to start giving it to Daniel Jennings and just keep moving forward. And, like Mike Fulks, the assistant Beckley basketball coach, came up down the sideline at the end of the game and he said, sometimes they just got the bigger, badder dude. He's going to Penn State for a reason. And that's right. And that's exactly right. He had 250 yards from scrimmage. But just a really great game by him. And, Princeton staff, I thought, put together a pretty good offensive game plan, especially there in the second half. I talked to their offensive coordinator. There were some things that Beckley had shown them in previous years that they were able to take advantage of. But I thought it was a really good game from both ends. I think for Beckley, it's difficult because Landon Jones got hurt, I think, in the second half. I'd say it was probably the third or fourth quarter. And that hurts them, especially from the linebacking standpoint. That's a massive loss, I think, for them. And it's tough because if you're Beckley, this was opportunity. It was right there for you. Princeton's offense, you kind of had them where you wanted. They couldn't really produce much outside of Jennings and their offensive line, and they were kind of able to beat them at their own game. I will say, I got to give credit to Beckley's defense. I do think that they actually look pretty good. That secondary is legit. Part of it, there were some plays I think to be had for Barker there, but at the same time, they did a good job of just covering things up and taking things away.
Yep.
And the pass rush was able to get to him at different points. And I say all this about Barker, but at the same time, I think that he saved them a lot because Princeton had snap issues all year long. High snaps and things like that, and there were a couple that went over his head, and he saved them from being recovered by Beckley. And that was a game where they needed him to be a game manager. Don't lose us the game. As long as we can win it, as long as we can get it to Jennings and get out of here with a win, that's all we care about. Because right now, Princeton has one less win than Bridgeport and Fairmont Senior, and they're sitting at number 2. The way it looks to me is that they will at worst be number 2 as long as they win out. So if you're Princeton, you came in here, you might not like the statistics unless you're Daniel Jennings, but you got the win, and that's all that matters. You won't be playing in Honeycutt through November.
And my biggest take on this was that when you sent me the stats at halftime, and it was, I believe, 34-14 and plays ran, and it was only 7-0. I mean, the first thought goes through my head is like, wow, because I did see the play, where they got stopped at the 1. I was like, man, Beckley didn't take advantage of what they needed to. And had they done that, I mean, it changes the whole dynamic. It almost takes Jennings out of the game, because Princeton's going to have to go to the air more, try to chase a little bit. But with it being just a 7-0 game, they were allowed to pretty much stay in that running mentality and that mindset. And, it's just a matter of whenever you're in a big game like this, you've got to take advantage of what you do. And, I know you expressed it, and when I saw that number of plays at halftime, I was like, man, there's just no way they're going to be able to, get enough plays in to win this game. But the adjustments were made, and they did what they needed to do in the second half. So, we knew Beckley's defense was going to be tough and hard to handle, and it proved out to be that way. But honestly, it just boiled down to Beckley's offense just not quite getting enough done in a big game to get the win for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, huge credit to that Princeton defense because they came out in the second half and it was completely different. I mentioned this in the deep post that I wrote this week, but Beckley in the first half, they averaged 4.5 yards per play. In the second half, it was 2.5. And in an offense that wants to run, you can't do that. They had 3 turnovers. And again, this isn't to disparage Gage Price or anything like that, but that's the difference when I talk about the game that Barker had is, he didn't turn the ball over. Gage Price, when you look at those 3 interceptions, it's hard not to think that they don't matter in a game. It's only a 1-score game. But they played really well. They made a defensive adjustment. They were going 5 down across the front to start the game. And they eventually just went, okay, we're just going to do 4 down and then kind of go from their player-based defense because they could cover a little bit more out of it. And it just put Beckley in long down and distances. Again, I talked about in the first half, their average distance to go on 3rd down was 3rd and 4. So what that does is, okay, if we get 2 yards on 3rd down, we have a manageable 4th down that we feel like we can get.
Yep.
In the second half, it was 10.2 yards, and some of those were penalties. But that takes Beckley completely out of their game. They have to throw the ball a little bit more, which is what they don't want to do. They want to run the ball, and it's just not really what they're accustomed to doing, especially in those situations. And you're throwing Price to a really good defense. His edge rushers are legit. Right. I think they're the 2 best edge rushers, maybe the 2 best defensive players in the area. And, obviously they were without Lowe and Mosser. But Marvy Howard stepped up. He had 2 big interceptions, including one of them on 3rd and 8. Beckley was at the Princeton 37, I think. He tosses it down to the goal line, and Marvy Howard comes up with an interception. That stalls a potential scoring drive right there. But yeah, just a lot of credit. Talk about a lot about the Princeton offense, but that was a really good defensive effort there, especially without those 2 starters.
Huge defensive effort, because we were, I guess, and I'm kind of speak collectively a little bit. If we were going to kind of project a weakness on Princeton's defense, it would be the run, but they have absolutely, kind of shored that up and did a really good job in the second half. And unfortunately for Beckley, it just kind of gashes open an old wound, of they seem to kind of be their own worst enemy, in big games. They turn the ball over at just some inopportune times and kind of cost themselves a little bit. And, that's definitely a game. If you play it 10 times, it's hard to tell how many, each team wins because it's a pretty evenly matched game. But, bottom line is you have to find a way to win somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Beckley, it doesn't get any easier because we talked about they have Spring Valley this week, which is another, Princeton caliber team that's going to be trying to play for a state championship. And then you got Oak Hill and you got GW coming into this. We talked about this third straight year they started 5-1, and now they're 1-8 after this 5-1 starts across the last 3 years. And it's a very difficult to climb out of that hole moving forward.
And like you said, I think you can't overstate the fact of losing Landon Jones. I mean, he's kind of their guy on defense, and now they do have still very good players on defense. Don't get me wrong, but that guy's something special. Mm-hmm. And not to have him out there changes things just a little bit. And then it's going to test the senior leadership a little bit of this bunch because losing him hurts, but also that little bug in the back of your ear back there keeps saying, are we going to do this again? Is it?
That's a human element of it.
Yeah, you fight those things as an athlete. You're not stupid. You know how things have gone. So, and last year I think this group was a little stung by some kids that maybe didn't step up like they thought they would. So, now it's their time to step up and get a couple big wins for Beckley.
Yeah, absolutely. We got quite a slate. We're going to run through some of them real quick. Grayson County, Virginia at Bluefield. Grayson County counts as AAA points for Bluefield. They came in at 4-2. Gave them a huge bump. Like Bluefield goes to number 8 projected ratings with this win. Not really a ton of stats. I was sent some from Max Simpson. 20 of 25, over 200 yards passing. And I was watching a little bit of that game today. I think that they're getting to the point where they just kind of realize they can't run the ball very effectively. I was watching some of it. Outside runs, they were getting stuffed. And, it's just basically let's use our short passing game as an extension of the run game. And Simpson's kind of keeping them on schedule. I think moving forward that they're kind of figuring out, like, it's all going to have to be on the shoulders of Max for the most part with what they have coming up. They have Oak Hill. And again, we'll talk about this later. But Oak Hill, then Giles, and then James and Rhodes end it. So it's tough, and I think that's their strength right now. A huge win for them as it seems they're starting to turn their season around.
I think if you maybe just even a few weeks back, maybe before the Independence game, if you said, okay, Bluefield's going to have a home game in the playoffs, we'd be like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I got a bridge down the road to sell you. That's like no way. And so credit to Coach Simons. And in the back of your mind, you always feel like Bluefield's going to do this. They're going to find a way. They're going to figure it out somehow. And even though at that point it was like, okay, maybe this might be the year. No, it's definitely the year to keep the trend going, it looks like. So, they're in pretty solid shape right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Greenbrier West at Petersburg. Petersburg started this one off hot. West got it back to within a score, and Petersburg pulled away. Evan Vandal, 40 rushes.
Yeah, the school record is 48, but he's got the quarterback record.
Yeah, because he had like 39 a couple weeks ago, then 40.
48.
That poor young man needs to ice up, and it doesn't get any better for Greenbrier West. They have Sherman next week. I do think that they're one of the 16. They're probably one of the 8 best teams, or 10 best teams at worst in single A. But with the schedule, the way it's playing out, I'm not sure if they'll have what they need to get into the playoffs.
They are just so beat up. They're so beat up, and that's just unfortunately a product of the schedule that they've had to play, but for various reasons. And it's unfortunate for the kids because I think when we started the year, we were convinced they were going to be in the playoffs. There was no doubt about it. But this is why you play because they've lost some crucial players, and even though you've got kids that step up, every coach goes with that next man mentality. There's a reason that seniors are varsity players and sophomores and freshmen are learning. And, sometimes those lessons are a little hard. You just hope that somehow they can, learn quickly. But, it's just a hard time to have to put those kids in right now. You've gone with James Monroe, Petersburg on the road, and now Sherman at home. And, like we've talked, Sherman's a really good football team. So, I think, unfortunately, they're kind of in a must-win kind of situation right now. They need this one, and they need to want a trail in order to get in. But, it's tough, man. They just have a ton of injuries.
If they do get those two, though, those are two good ones to have. Because
Perfect,
Trail's
yeah.
at AA points,
Yep.
and Sherman's coming in
With a
as the
bunch of
top 8
wins.
teams. Yeah, so absolutely. Mingo Central, Independence. This one, Independence with the big blowout win, scored 50 points. This is the third time this year that freshman quarterback Brock Green has thrown for over 200 yards. Pretty impressive. Had a pair of 100-yard receivers. Silas Nelson did his thing again. I think 270 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, and then a 47-yard catch where he just kind of snagged. It was like I was like, that's why like we talked about him playing receiver. It was really good, 47-yard catch. So over 300 yards in total offense, 5 touchdowns, and this thing just keeps humming. We'll talk about it again later, but a big matchup coming up with Princeton.
Yep.
But they, as it currently sits, they are number 4 in double A in ratings, and this is where the strength of schedule is really helping them. Not only are they picking up bonus points from the AAA teams that they've played that have only lost 1 game, but they also have played a good, strong AA slate. All these teams are in the playoffs, minus Mingo Central. AAA points from Brook, and I know Brook's struggling. But it's starting to pay off for Independence, and I think regardless of what happens this week against Princeton, it feels like as long as they take care of business against Summers County, they're probably penciled in for a home playoff game.
We talked a little bit at the beginning of the year. We felt like Brock Green was going to be a really good quarterback, and when you see the kid play, you can definitely tell he has advanced skills and advanced ability. But man, wow. I mean, that's just all you can say. That performance is just wow. I mean, that kid's something special. And, you keep having to look down at the book, and it's like, freshman, right? Freshman. He is a freshman. He's amazing. He's a good kid and a heck of a player. So, it's just sky's the limit for this young man.
Absolutely. And then, again, Independence picking up wins. Nicholas County at Greenbrier Aces. We talked about it. Big win for Nicholas County, AAA points. They're also in that top half of AA and set to host a playoff game. Greenbrier Ace, in full disclosure, Brody Hamrick did get hurt. He had an ankle injury. They were worried that was broken. Doesn't seem like it is. But I think that's huge. Maybe if he plays the entire game, it's probably different. I think he only threw 2 or 3 passes.
And Settle gets hurt too.
Yeah, exactly. And those are their 2 top producers on offense outside of Brady May. So now you give teams the opportunity to just kind of key on Brady May and sort of take him away. And Nicholas County, they do a really good job. Gene knows what he's doing there. But yeah, this is an impressive points win. They have another opportunity that we'll talk about again here in a minute.
Devin Nash, man, Devin Nash. I mean, that kid just, he's like, how would Stuart Scott used to say, he cools the other side of the pillow, man. He just smooth. I mean, he just, every week, he kind of does his thing, 125, 130, 140 yards, keeps pounding the rock, and, he's been there steady Eddie. And Nicholas County, I got to admit, that score, and, I didn't know about, Brody getting hurt till later, but when I looked at that score, I was completely shocked,
Best game of the year for Colton Helms, too. 6 of 7 passing, over 100 yards, touchdown, no turnovers.
Helps when you got that running game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Oak Hill at Buchanan Upshur. Buchanan Upshur does not have a win this year. Oak Hill had to squeak this one out in overtime. I got their box right before we started the show. What I would assume happened, again, I haven't seen it, is that they probably started to key on Richardson a little bit more. I think he only had like 10 carries for 39 yards rushing or so. Right. And again, I think that might be a little bit of the game plan, and I'll talk about it when we get to their matchup. Right. I think teams are kind of starting at the point of stop the quarterback, and we feel like we can probably stop a little bit of everything else.
Yeah, and that's, I would definitely, I'm not a genius when it comes to scheming defense in football, but I would definitely make him throw it. Now, not that he can't do that, but that's been the struggle this year for Oak Hill is to move the ball through the air. And, they kind of escaped. I mean, let's be real honest. I mean, and that seems to be, I kind of talked about that last week a little bit. There's just a little worrisome
escaping
here.
A lot
that they're escaping against teams that we feel like they're probably should be 2-3 touchdowns better than. And that's a little concerning. But, they got the job done, and that's the bottom line at this time of year. You want to keep winning because, there's no style points in there. There's just, wins and losses right now. But, and I was really surprised when it went to overtime even, to get that win. So, I don't know, if
Full moon, homecoming, maybe they'll chalk it up to that.
Well, and you wonder sometimes, are they looking ahead? Are they convinced? We've talked about this with West Side and some other teams. Are they kind of being told that they're really good and they kind of believe in it a little bit? And is this the wake up call that they need, to kind of finish out the season? Because they've still got a game up at University that's going to be a key game when it comes to probably getting a home field advantage, a lot like last year. And even though University's record's not going to knock you over, I believe they're 3-4, but they've lost to some really good teams and they've got some really good wins. So that's going to be a tough game.
And that doesn't even count the Beckley game, where it's already going to be heated. Yeah. We've talked about it.
And Beckley's in kind of desperation mode to get a home game, and they're going to really want that game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll talk about it later, but yeah, exactly. Last game, Riverview at Montcalm. Riverview pulls the stunner with a kickoff return touchdown in the final minute. That's a real gut shot to Montcalm. I think they're 2 spots out in the playoff right now, so there's still opportunity there. But man, that's a killer. It keeps Riverview on pace for a home game, though.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of. I bet that was a heck of a game to watch up on the hill up there at Montcalm.
Yeah.
Because you got to feel like, probably if you're a Riverview fan, you probably have lost this game. You're going to lose to Montcalm, and be the 3rd loss in a row, and then the excitement, of that, return, and then the other side, of course, of what is it, the old Wild World of Sports, the thrill of victory and agony of defeat kind of thing. You're Montcalm thinking this is the big win that you need, that probably is going to push you over, at least towards the playoffs, for the first time, and then you just watch it kind of run away from you. I mean, it had to be just an absolute deflating moment.
Reminds me a little bit of 2021, whenever Fairmont Senior, I think, was the 16 seed that year. And in the second round, they played Robert C. Byrd, and Fairmont, I think it was Dylan Hours, returned a kickoff for a touchdown with 50 seconds left to win that game, and Fairmont Senior continues their run all the way to winning the state championship and as a 16 seed.
I'm sure they were in euphoria for to take that lead late in the game. And, it's just, you hear coaches talk about it, and we always used to joke about Dana Holgerson talking about 3 sides of the ball, but you got to be solid in all 3 phases, man. And they can beat you in a tight game. Poor special teams play can really, really sting you.
Gotcha. And that's going to wrap up Week 8. For Week 9, we have quite a slate. We talked about Petersburg. James Monroe gets to take that trip up there. Petersburg is a single A team. But as we kind of saw, they're not to be overlooked. Should be another good test for James Monroe's defense. And again, we've talked about it. They want to work as far up in the ratings as they possibly can. They still have that shot of the home playoff game. So you can't lose to a single A team here.
I really thinking about it, Friday night couldn't have gone better for James Monroe in that regard, because they only had to play their starters for the first half, and they didn't see the field the second half. So you get that little extra bit of rest. You're fresh. Nobody really got hurt in the game, so that was big for them. And we've heard coaches talk about it over and over and over. Is you can be really good, but you got to have some luck. You've got to have guys stay healthy. Ball's got to bounce your way a little bit, and James Monroe is going to that game in the condition that they need to be. And with Bluefield lurking, that's a definite game they need to win.
Absolutely. Montcalm at Meadow Bridge. This is the one that, not for sure, but I do believe this is the one that we're going to end up sending you out to. We talked about it. This has playoff implications. Meadow Bridge, I believe, is rated number 15 in single A right now. Montcalm just outside. Meadow Bridge, the way their schedule looks, it looks pretty tenable that they could still win out, especially if they get this game. Montcalm need this game, I would say. They need those points. They need everything they can get from it. Really contrast the styles here. Montcalm,
exactly.
Never thought you'd say that, but Montcalm, they want to take to the air, they want to throw it, they want to do all this. Younger threw 30 times. I think he actually leads the area in passing yards, which again feels insane to say for a kid from Montcalm. Meanwhile, Meadow Bridge, Caden Sims leads the area in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. 1,300 yards, 17 touchdowns. Contrast the styles here, and it should be a fun game.
Yeah, it's the way things have worked for me this summer. I was actually able to get out a lot more than I had in the past, and I actually got to talk and do a story with Mr. Younger and talk to Mr. Sims. So now here we go with a big clash between the two, and that's the thing the take I get is it's just such a clash of styles of how this is going to play out. And so you wonder, if somebody else going to be forced to step up and make a play or do something big in this game. But, it's an exciting game. when I made the schedule at the beginning of the year and I wrote down Montcalm at Meadow Bridge, I was like, man, that might be a pretty good game. That might be an important game. Well, it's going to be an important game, especially for Montcalm. I mean, it's going to be huge. I think they got to have this game, because of the points that Meadow Bridge would give them. I think this is a game they've got to have to get in the playoffs. And if they don't get it, I don't know if they can pull off that first time ever getting in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think this has a chance to really be a display of like full-on, small school Friday night live sort of atmosphere.
Yep.
Means
Natural
something
grass,
to both teams.
the whole
Yeah,
and it should be beautiful. The weather's supposed to be pretty good.
absolutely.
So it should be fun.
Absolutely. Moving on, Oak Hill at Bluefield. This is really interesting. Again, we've talked about it. Devon Marion does a good job at scheming defensively to stop these kids. Bluefield has a freshman quarterback. And they know what they like to do. They like again, I think they're going to lean a little bit more on the pass,
Right.
especially with some of the kids that Oak Hill has, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. You might try to run a little bit if you're Bluefield, but I think that they've kind of figured out at this point, we're probably going to live and die as Simpson does. For Oak Hill, I mean, you're coming off that scare against Buchanan Upshur. They are hanging on to that home playoff game. Yeah, I know they're number 5, but it's a thread.
Yeah.
The way we look at it, they're just kind of skating by at this point. And we've talked about it each week as this week their offense gets off the ground, and I think their offense is what it is. We're 8 weeks into this season.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to change. I think they expect their guys to just kind of go out and win one-on-ones, and if it doesn't, then we have Richardson kind of go off script and he'll save us. So I'm curious if Bluefield's able to craft a plan to make him be a passer. And again, I don't think he's necessarily a bad passer. He throws a nice ball, but it just seems the way Oak Hill's offense has operated all year long. It's been okay, if we're off script, we're going to rely on his legs to scramble and get something free. So if I'm Bluefield, I try to stop that first, and then maybe whatever else after that. But just commit to taking Richardson out of the game as much as possible. If it's J.D. Moritz or some of the other big backs that beat you, you kind of live with that. But sometimes you have to deter teams one way or the other. I always go back to Bill Belichick's game plan against the Bills when he was with the Giants.
Right.
Everyone was like, why are you letting Thurman Thomas run for all these yards? And it's like, to keep them from throwing to Andre Reed. They're kind of feeding into our hands. Like, let them do this. So if you're Bluefield, maybe you attack them this way. And again, if you're Bluefield, this is a massive points game. It can almost guarantee you like a spot there where you're not. Okay, it's like, hey, we get to stay home at Mitchell. And
might even get 2 games at home.
Yeah, exactly, especially if you can win the next 2 after this.
Yeah.
But and if you're Oak Hill, you're in must-win mode. You're already skating by each week. You're trying to hold on to that home playoff game. It's pretty standard.
The thing a couple concerns in that game, or a couple things I would look at is, can Bluefield put enough pressure on Richardson to kind of make him, do the things they want him to do? Because that seems to be the team where he has the trouble, is teams have been able to pressure him and kind of force him out, and make him use his legs. And the other thing would be, Oak Hill's defense is really fast enough to kind of neutralize some of Bluefield's speed. So can Bluefield still, make some headway on offense, with the faster D-backs and faster athletes that Oak Hill has? But I got to admit, I mean, we've talked about it and hammered it, even tonight. Oak Hill's iffiness, in the last few games, you just kind of wonder, what's kind of going on, if there's injuries or different things like that. Because, I really, 13 points in regulation against Buchanan Upshur is a real head scratcher. It's great they got the win, but, Bluefield's going to put you under some pressure, and I feel like Bluefield's going to score some points on you. So you're going to have to be able to counter that. Yeah,
and one thing I think that also just kind of stands out to me with this, you hit on it with their offensive struggles, is you got to find something. We talked about it, especially with Nicholas County. These are coin flip games. One-score games are statistically lucky. Like they regress to a mean year after year. Nicholas County had that issue last year where they lost their first 3 games by a combined 6 points or so. Ball bounces one way or the other. You look at Independence. If they get that 2-point conversion to go, that's game right there.
Right.
So it makes things difficult. If Buchanan Upshur, if something happens, like if you get stopped or you fumble in overtime, it's just the same there. So Yeah.
Flirting with disaster, as they say, a little Molly Hatchet reference.
Whereas we say that, and then there's a chchance they probably go and they beat Bluefield 45-0. It's like, oh, well, we're supposed to be the smart guys.
Freddie has talked about that, that they are more of a a double-A type team now. And, but I don't know if Oak Hill is that physically bigger than Bluefield. Beckley was, and that caused them a lot of trouble. Greenbrier West wasn't, and Bluefield was Greenbrier East. Sorry, and they pulled that out. So, I think it's going to be an interesting game to see how this one plays out. Especially Bluefield, kind of riding. They seem to be riding the upward trend, and Oak Hill wobbling a little bit.
Yeah, and they've gotten healthy. Jeff King's been back, so it definitely helps a lot. Moving on from there, Princeton at Independence. This is a game I'll have. Princeton's kind of already talking about it from what I've seen. Even during the Beckley game, some of the kids, Brad Monster, Markel Lowe, they're looking forward to being back, and this is their chance to kind of make up for lost time. Yeah. This one, I think for me, the matchup I'm watching more is Independence's young line against those two edge rushers, because I think if you're Independence's offensive coordinator, which I think is Max Lilly this year, you have to, whether it's leaving extra guys in, you can't let Brock take a beating.
Right.
It is in all cases a mismatch for Independent. They're starting for the most part. I think Alex Blankenship still start to tackle, but they're starting kids, like legitimate freshmen across the line against, again, Caleb Kaiser, who has a ton of sacks, who is probably going to be
big-time prospects.
Yeah, and Daniel Jennings, who, again, Penn State, made man. So you're trying to figure out how to slow these guys down off the edge while also protecting your rookie quarterback. What do you do if you're Independence? Do you try to gamble and see if Princeton doesn't really load the box to stop Silas, because a lot of teams have kind of committed those resources to do so, while Princeton probably doesn't think that they need to just because of their talent levels. Or do you try to get it out to your wide receivers out on the edge, use the quick passing game as an extension of the run and try to move the ball that way? I think there's a lot to go here. And again, I think that for Independence's defense, it'll also be another challenge. They have an opportunity to attack a really good offensive line. They have some good pass rushers, some good players of their own. But will they be able to get to Barker and kind of make him skittish and be able to slow down the offense somehow? Because it's very difficult. You saw it. They were without their two leading outputs, and they still got a guy that had 250 yards from scrimmage.
Right.
There's a lot here. I think Independence is I think that their shots, it's a long shot for them to win this game. But, crazier things have happened.
Yeah, we've seen really crazy stuff. But, I think, Barker is a lot more comfortable with Mosser on the field, and so that's, he's got that back, and, Mosser just always seems to find a way to get open. I mean, even if it's a quick slant, just, quick out, I mean, he's always open, and, that yards after the catch, he's always dangerous with that kind of stuff, so you don't really have to chuck it down the field as much, you can get it out to him, and, that kind of two-headed monster of Lowe and Jennings, that's just going to kind of pound on you, and, I think Independence has got to figure out a way to kind of control the ball a little bit, keep them off the field as much as possible. Definitely can't turn the ball over, things like that. But I think a long shot might be right. It's going to be really a tough game for Independence, but I'm sure they'll line up and they'll have a scheme and they'll give it a try.
Yeah, and it just kind of takes me back to the Scott game, because I think stylistically that's probably the closest that Independence has seen to something like that, where they like to throw the ball a ton. What Scott did really well is in the second half they just started attacking the flats, because Independence is playing off. And if you do that, Princeton has a very versatile screen game, and they get their wide receivers involved in that. Yeah. So if you give them more cushion, if you give Brad Monster cushion in space, or Markel Lowe,
and they can move you off that line.
Yeah, if you let them work their screen games by playing off, it's extremely difficult to work around.
It'll take a minor miracle.
Yeah. Shady Spring and Nicholas County. We hit on it a little bit. This is another opportunity for Nicholas County to cash into some points. Shady Spring, I think, is projected to be number 15 in AAA right now, and I think 17 is like 2-5 or so. But if you're Shady, you're still fighting for your playoff life, and this isn't an easy game. These games have always been competitive. It came down to a field goal last year, I believe, and it's just always been like that. if you're Nicholas County, you're looking at this, it's like, we might be able to solidify a spot here in the playoffs if we win this game. Not just in the playoffs, but a home game if we win this one.
Yeah, it's big. It's big time for both, and it just always seems to be kooky between those two. Always seems to come down to the last little bit. I mean, there was a stretch there when Nicholas County kind of owned that series just a little bit, but Shady's found a way to kind of flip that into tight games, and you kind of wonder is maybe this the game that Nicholas County gets some payback as far as the football gods kind of throwing them some wrinkles here and there in some weird spots. They're going to get that bounce that they need at the right time, but should be just an absolutely awesome football game to watch. I don't think we can look at either team and say that they're physically overmatched or anything like that. I think they both have good solid quarterbacks. They both can run. I think Nicholas County might be tested offensively with Shady's secondary, which seems to be, grabbing 2 or 3 interceptions every single week like it's their job.
Jalen Bailey was another
exactly
this past week.
Yeah. So and when they get them, it's not like they're just catching them falling down. They're creating havoc with them, taking them to the house. So it should be a good one. This is kind of a week where you'd like to be able to split. Maybe put some of the games on Thursday and Saturday so you can catch them on. I think this one's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. Last 3, Sherman at Greenbrier West, which we hit on a little bit. Spring Valley at Beckley, West Side at Tug Valley. After Greenbrier West, it kind of feels like you have to win this one in some capacity. Definitely. You get it at home. Yep. And how healthy are you? Evan Vandal eventually feels like he's probably going to feel the ramifications of running it 40 times a game.
Yeah, I just wonder, if he can take the beating, and if West can move Sherman, they've got some pretty impressive athletes along the front, and it's going to be a tough one to win. It's good for West to be at home finally, in a situation like this, out of 2 tough road games back to back. But you just wonder how physically, ready, can Greenbrier West be. They'll be ready mentally to play, but, sometimes your mind's ready to roll and your body's like, man, I've just had enough.
Absolutely. Spring Valley at Beckley, we've talked about this. Spring Valley, the record is misleading. They are a AAA team. They played a quad A schedule because of the remnants of the MSAC. They have a really good kid. His name is Jalen Abercrombie. Came in this season in the Kennedy discussion, and I'd say probably about the time the playoffs wrap up, he'll still be in that. I'd say semifinal weekend, especially if their season stays alive. And as we really start to whittle the candidates down, he may be back in that conversation again. I believe he plays a little bit of wide receiver. I know he catches the ball some, so that could be an interesting matchup for Beckley. But if you really want to turn this around and buck that narrative, if you're Beckley, you really have to win this game. You get it at home. It's the opportunity to go out and make a statement and feel like you're stopping the bleeding. And, I say stop the bleeding when they've only lost 1 game in a row, but this could easily turn into 3 in a row or 4 in a row.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like they have the team to do that. They have the leadership and things like that. Even though losing Landon Jones is going to really hurt, I feel like they have the team that can make this turnaround. But you don't. It's not a must win because they're in the playoffs. So, but I think maybe psychologically and mentally, it is kind of a must-win in a way. They need to get this game, and that'll kind of boost them into the Oak Hill game, and then finish out with George Washington. But if they can buck this narrative right now, they got a really good shot at winning these next 2 games right there behind it.
Absolutely. And last one, West Side at Tug Valley. Tug Valley is really good. They're one of the best teams in Single A for a reason. So, and I've heard their quarterback's a really good athlete. For West Side, it's. They pretty much, I think it was like a 28-22 game right before a hook and lateral at the end of the half, and Westside really blew that thing open in the second half of the game. But if you're Westside, I think they come in right now at 9 in the ratings, which again is right below Bluefield, which kind of shows you where the schedule quality is kind of impacting both teams.
Right.
So if you're Westside, I think you absolutely have to have this game if you want a home playoff game. I know they have Shady down the road still. But if you lose this game, you're talking about maybe missing the playoffs entirely if you end up losing the Shady game, getting in as a 16 or 15 seed. I think West Side, this is a very important game. We've talked about it all year long.
Yeah, and it's a game that Honestly, I feel like it's a game Westside should win. I mean, I know Tug Valley's really good. There's no doubt about that. But Westside's got a ton of weapons. They got a lot of offense. I'm sure probably Justin Koger would probably like to see him maybe, boost that scoring a little bit earlier. To kind of, I know he's a young dude, but sometimes that can weigh on a coach. Kind of those close games going into the second half. Maybe they can jump out to a big lead, and I mean, I think they can score on Tug Valley, but I also think that if they get in one of those nip and tuck games in the second half with Tug Valley, that could be a little bit of a treacherous situation.
Absolutely. And we're going to take this opportunity now to move on to our Player of the Week winners. We were both set on this one. For our area in the South, the Player of the Week for Week 8 is Daniel Jennings from Princeton. And for Kanawha Valley, it is David Fennessy, running back from Scott. Had a chance to see Fennessy earlier in the year, really good player. And then Jennings, we were both kind of on the same wavelength here. That kind of performance in that spot where you knew he was getting the ball, just kind of, that was the edge right there.
I think, you haven't known me forever, but you've known me long enough to know the stats drive me crazy.
Yeah.
They really drive me nuts because people like to toss them out there and don't put them in perspective. I mean, they, 300 yards passing or this and that. I'm like, well, if the team stinks, okay, it's not that big a deal. Beckley's defense, to put this in perspective, was only allowing about 77 yards a game.
Mm-hmm.
And they played some really good teams, and they'd only allowed about 180 yards, right at 180 yards of total offense a game. Well, just from the stats that you have here, he had 203 yards rushing on 23 attempts, and he had the one big screen pass for the touchdown. And the majority of that came in the second half when the game was on the line, and his team looked in trouble, and they needed somebody to step up, and he stepped up with a huge performance against an incredibly good defense. So, those stats matter, because that's an impressive performance. And I as much as I like some of the other kids, I mean, Brock Green's performance was unbelievable. Jalen Bailey's performance was incredible. I mean, you just look down that list of players that we had this week, and you can make a case for just about every single one of them. But when you put up those kind of numbers against a defensive stout as Beckley's, it was just kind of a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, and I know that puts our count at the 4 Princeton kids on the year, but at the same time, they're clearly at a level that nobody else in the area is at. And I think the only other team that we've had since we've, Lootpress has been around in 2021, would probably be the 2022 Independence team.
Yeah.
And, there are a lot of good, we talk about it, there were, James and Rowe went to a state championship game that year. Independence, Bluefield was really good that year too, even though they went out in the first round. We've had a lot of really good teams over the last couple of years. And I know the Independence only had 2 Player of the Week winners that year, but you kind of look all around. It's really hard to argue against what those kids have done in their respective weeks.
No doubt about it. And they've won some big games already. And we felt like they were going to be a pretty good team coming into this year. We were kind of a little iffy on the defense. We didn't know what was going to get there. That's proven out to be a really big deal too. So they're going to be number 2 in the state right now in AAA, and there's some really good AAA teams in that group.
Absolutely. Well, like we talked about, we'll have some sectional soccer coming up this week. Should be interesting. I always say that soccer can be a weird one. For years, I think there were 2 years in a row before Green Prairie won that sectional championship and eventually the state championship. Beckley beat them on PKs, so we've talked about it. Beckley ended up losing to Wheeling Park. They had to come back against Huntington. And those are obviously really good teams. Wheeling Park is number 1 for a reason. Huntington, they were number 1 at one point. These are really good teams. But just never count it out. Anything could happen. I've seen it, especially with this AAA region and section in particular, where it can get kind of wonky. So, yeah.
Well, you've seen it in the NBA playoffs a lot, too. The regular season's played one way, postseason's played a different way, and it's a lot tougher in the postseason.
Absolutely. You have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I want to kind of, throw a little shout out to Coach Taylor at Princeton. I mean, I read his comments after your game, and, I'm kind of a big, I understand the coach has to do his thing and lead the team and stuff like that, but I'm also kind of big on, there's some responsibility for the kids too, some self-responsibility, and you've got to take ownership of that as well. But Coach Taylor pretty much laid it out on the line that it was his fault. He was not doing the things that he felt like he needed to do to kind of, keep that ship running in the right direction. And, you can see this week, him taking the responsibility. I felt like it was a totally different Princeton team out on the field out there, because as you had touched on earlier, there was a couple of times in that game, maybe more than a couple, that Princeton could have erupted and got really upset, and they kept their cool and played the game and got the job done. So, kind of a shout out to him. I mean, he's kind of taken a little bit of heat this year because of some things, and he took ownership of it. He corrected it, and hopefully they're going to move forward from it.
Absolutely. And just a note, their penalties, I think I had them 7 for 47 or 7 for 40 something. And 2 of those wrong kickoffs out of bounds.
Yep.
So, procedural stuff like that, you're just counting basically 5 penalties for under 40 yards or so, which is, and it's an improvement.
I would have never thought they would have done that.
Yeah, absolutely not. So they get it. Now the thing is, can you maintain it? So that's
right, exactly.
You have to keep doing that all the way through.
That's
so
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, for my co-host Russ Udy, I'm Tyler Jackson. That's going to wrap things up for today. We appreciate you tuning in to the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. We'll see you next week.